Welcome to Tales to be Told in the Dark, episode 24. I only know this because I had to go back and have a look and see what was the last number. So yes, as mentioned in number 23, the topic is, well, basically the etymology of the word individual. And individually. Now we are in a realm of contrasts, so whilst you are all on an individual path, it's also an individual lie, because whilst it is individual, there is also so many parallels between us all. And of course, the whole purpose of this walking this path as an individual is to find your true self. If you have this perception or a concept that there is a system in place that seems to go to enormous lengths in ways that affect your everyday life in the minutest way possible, and that some of them are very subtle. For example, the order of stories on the news, this sort of flip-flop between a good story, a bad story, but progressively getting more and more negative. And if you want a sort of visual analogy to that, think of the Spanish Inquisition and that swinging axe that comes down and starts cutting and cutting. The descent into man, you could say. These things are all presented for you to see and weigh up inside yourself. To use a Rudolf Steiner quote or an analogy, shall we say, you have the thinking, the feeling, and the willing. Now look at the one that's in the middle of those three. You've got your thinking, which has an interaction with feeling, and you've also got the willing, which has an interaction with the feeling as well. That is where the true sight is. That is where that expression about you already know the answers. If you can develop that communication within oneself, and you go with what feels right, but of course checking as well, because don't forget to be in balance. The real B&B is the balance and the boundaries, not bed and breakfast in the material realm, although it is the equivalent. The bed is obviously the rest and the balance, and then the breakfast is the equivalent of the being re-energized. Yeah, balance and boundaries. So, and the boundaries, of course, are what you will allow. If you're completely benevolent, there is quite a lot that would take advantage of that, and because there are no boundaries been set. You're a sovereign being, and therefore, as a sovereign being, you have to decide inside yourself where to draw the line, because you can be giving and giving and giving, and then of course it becomes draining. So it's finding that balance, and often the only way we find that is to go through the experience of, I certainly have. And to some degree, I've been on the other end of it, where I've done the taking as well. I'll admit that. Circumstances and things can affect that. Anyway, let's get back on to track with this. So, individual. Now, readily, most people will point to the fact it has the word divide right in the middle of it. But let me break this down into syllables. So you've got in, divide, you all. But you also have in, divide, dual. This is a realm of contrasts. You have a battle going on with inside yourself until you can unite your left and right hemispheres, your divine masculine and your divine feminine, so everything is working as one and pulling in the same direction, rather than part of you wanting to pull in a direction, say with an addiction, and trying to figure things out from the conscious mind. It's the same with the addictions. If you're trying to do it from the intellect, this is something Tom Campbell talks about, it will fail. If you do it from a heart space, it comes right. Now, I can give you a very recent testimony, and this has got a duality to it. And I refer, of course, to giving up smoking. When I say I've given up smoking, I have given up commercial tobacco, I've given up nicotine. What I haven't given up is the habit. 42 years of, this is the Taurus part of me coming out, 42 years of stubbornly trying to prove a point. And it's, so if I get up in the morning and I'll drink water, and it's like, I want to be smoking something. My hands need something to do. Because it's got used to doing that. So it's breaking the habit and breaking the pattern. Well, the habit is the pattern. Anyway, we've gone slightly off track here again. I'm sorry about this. So let's take the in part. Well, it's the I. The capital I. The I organization, to use a Rudolf Steiner. Now you've got the N. Well, it refers to something inside yourself. So it's the I, your true self, and the N represents the sine wave, a bit like on a heart monitor. It goes up and down and then up again, and it's linear, because we're in this realm where everything has this linear perspective that is measured as a thing we call time. Next you have divide. Now, I spoke about this, it must be about 2 years ago now, about how Gaelic is, I think there's something like 452 words that are common with Hebrew. And of course I was looking at it the wrong way, of how did they get from the Middle East and bring this language. But I'm going to say once again, I'll put the link in the description, Culain Ruled by Venus channel. It's the Conor MacDari book, Irish Wisdom in the Bible and Pyramids. That will give you the story the right way round in this reality. If you look at all the words, particularly in Ireland and in Scotland, you'll see you've got a lot of place names starting B-A-L or B-E-L, referencing Baal. Now that is not something evil, that is a reference to the sun. Now I forgot where I was going with this. It's because I was looking at something that I was going to bring into this anyway. But anyway, so, yes, back on track now. So the divide, divid, David. Neville Goddard talks about this. It's not Jesus Christ. The son is called David because he will recognize you and call you my Lord, which is how you would address someone that is the Father. Then you know who you truly are. You're a co-creator. You are, this is basically what the Big Bang Theory refers to. You're a fractalized expression of this creative power. With a physical body, you are the operant of it. It's how it expresses through humanity. God became man so man can find his way back and realise who he is. It's the ultimate computer game. It's the headset you put on, or even a bodysuit, you could say, that you put on, in one sense. So you can play this game. I mean, if you think of it in that way, does it not sound a much more attractive proposition anyway, and something quite exciting and something that's a little bit fun? But of course, we're in a realm of contrasts. So yes, now when we look at Gaelic, now there's a huge connection to the Welsh language as well, and how the name David is so prevalent in Wales. That should be something that gets alarm bells ringing with the story we've been told, the so-called history. The Middle East is a meddling ease. It's getting people focused to looking completely the wrong direction, basically. It's something I talked about or touched on yesterday in the Tales 23 about this. You can see this trial. You've got Hebrew, you've got Hibernia, you've got Hiberu, Nibiru, all these references, as it were. And then you've got this. Now, if you do a Google search and ask what is the significance of IHS, it will tell you that it's from the Greek, which means Jesus Christ. That's not actually true. It's actually older than that, and it is preserved in the Gaelic of both Ireland and Scotland as Iesa Criost. It's actually IES, which of course the I has been changed to a J, so IES becomes Jesus. Because that's coming from the opposite perspective, and just like the letter J will sort of indicate in its, if you see it as a glyph, it's like a hook. It's trying to hook you, lure you into Circes, which is a mythical goddess that would lure people into a room, lock the door, and corrupt their minds and other depraved things, not unlike the world's longest running play, as I've called it, which is a comedy of errors, which is basically a Sunday service in any religious building. Religion is the re-lie of the jinn, basically. It has a basis of truth, but of course it's very twisted, and it's putting an intermediary between you and your true self, your co-creator, and your creative self. You are an expression of the Creator. So the David or the divid pay huge dividends. That's where we get that word from as well. It's a mirrored word if you think about it, the divide, without the E on the end. So you've got D-I-V-I-D. So it references within that what is dying is that widening gap. It's being brought together. You notice with the letter V, it comes together at the bottom of that particular character or letter. It's another glyph. It's a unification, but it's also to unify, you have to go through that fall. There's the fall of man. You've also got that expressed as the fall of mankind with stories in the media. On a little side note, isn't it amazing how, I mean, I'm not that far from it. A country called Morocco, there was an earthquake. But the speed that there is these places you can donate money to, well, it's basically a stealth tax upon you and trying to guilt shame you into giving. But what are you actually giving to? I would think very carefully about that. These things are always registered. You'll notice that these sort of things only come about in certain countries, normally third world countries, but had it had been something like a avalanche in the Alps, there would be no collecting for bereaved families or a sort of relief fund for people that are affected by it, which could be quite a large number. Going back to South Wales, there was that huge disaster where I think it was a school in the mid-60s was completely obliterated by, I think it's slag from coal mining that had just suddenly collapsed and buried this town or part of this place, and involved a school with a lot of children. I can't remember really any more details about it than that, or exactly where it is. Maybe, I'm sure that could be found quite easily. But these sort of things can happen in Europe or in the United States. But it's funny how, if it's the Western world, it doesn't get this charities immediately set up, or at all come to that. It makes you wonder why, because surely the devastation is equally bad for those that are affected by it. And of course, how much do we know any of these stories are actually true? These are just things to weigh up, to go with what feels right. Feeling is the key to everything, providing it is coming from the heart space, of course, because you can think and create feelings, especially if you're on the lower conscious. So it is finding that discernment within oneself. And just check with yourself. Just check in with yourself on this one. Ask yourself, is my response coming from the heart? Am I saying something in a way that is not going to be so brutal and negative? It could be said with the best intentions, but it could come out wrong. I think most people are aware of this with, say, text messages, how impersonal they can be and how they can be read in a multiple of ways, and it can be written in totally innocently, but the person receiving can take offence to the way the thing's been written, because it doesn't even have tone of a voice, apart from the one you create in your mind as you're reading it, of course. But whose voice is that? Interesting little conundrum to sort of maybe meditate on. Anyway, so in divid, you all. Now, dual, as I mentioned, D-U-A-L. There's your dual, the dualistic nature of this reality of giving this perception of contrasts. Now, it becomes a dual within oneself. When you're in conflict within oneself, how are you going to deal with that? Well, the easy answer is just go through life experiences. Now, if you feel triggered by something and you react through anger or frustration, there's a little red flag for you. It's like, yeah, I still need to do more inner work because I've been pulled off course by an emotion. It's not to say that to not have emotions, it's acknowledging when you feel anger or you feel sadness or happiness, or any emotion, good or bad as we perceive them. The not so pleasant and the slightly more pleasant, shall we say. And it can go from one polarity to the other. But if you can just sit with these things and just weigh them up, you get rid of the dual and the duality of it all. Now, another way of expressing this is a way Neville Goddard talks about it, that you will be split right down your spine. It's basically, this is the Grim Reaper. It's been turned into some negative, fearful thing. It's just that. But think about, what is that scythe for? What would you use a scythe for? That's for harvesting. Now you're sorting out the wheat from the chaff. You're if you if we go with the sort of biblical expression, a fisher of men, for example, it's prizing open those oysters and you're looking for the pearls. So this is what the Grim Reaper role is, really. It's grim because it's not a pleasant job, but somebody's got to do it. I suppose is the way to look at this. So you're split to the base of your spine. Now you have the reunification. This is where you remember yourself because you come together as one, and it's a spiritual glue that joins you back together again. So it's basically like a metaphorical zip. It sort of goes right to the base and then rises up again like the Kundalini rising. And as it rises, providing it gets all the way up to the top, it's a bit like in the fun fair where you hit the hammer and you have to get it right so it goes ding on the bell at the top. It's basically based on this as well. Then that individuality, the individual is now a real individual expression of the Creator rather than an individual expression of the lower consciousness. What do I mean by that? I mean how most people they'll ask the question, what do you do? Or what do you do for a living? To which most people are perplexed when I say, well, what do I do for a living? I breathe. What do you do for a living? And how do you feel? A series of nerve endings all over my body. How do you feel? That's obviously not what they mean, but I like to give them a literal answer because the idea is hopefully it will get people to think and think, yes. Because it's so easy to get compartmentalized into only hearing words in one particular way when it is quite clear, especially when you get into the court system, there's a thing called legalese that sounds like English but has very different meanings. So there's the proof of that for a start, that there is definitely more than one meaning to words, but system programming gets us to compartmentalize everything. And you'll see this reflected in occupations, how everybody has gone from being multi-skilled to single task. And often some of these single task employments wouldn't lend themselves very, very well to doing anything else if that infrastructure collapsed or that industry shut down. Whereas if you look at, it's free online, look at the 1881 England and Wales census and pick a village and just have a look at the list of occupations. You'll see travelling shoemakers, you'll see hoop shavers, that's for making beer barrels. You'll see a whitesmith, blacksmith. A whitesmith is the one that would do the intricate fine details, say on the handle of a sword, the inlaid gemstones, that type of thing. Travelling brush and broom makers, you name it. There's all sorts of individual trades, basically being a sole trader, a self-employed. Notice sole trader. Now think about how many ways that could be interpreted as well. So yeah, individual, you are an individual expression. But at the same time, in this realm of contrasts, we're actually, for the main, we're walking parallels. Really, it's just to get to that point of self-realization, finding that creativity that you have within inside yourself. Now, this is something I was speaking earlier in messages about, that if you can go to the end, remember the future, to use a Neville Goddard expression. And there's a playlist all with loads of Neville Goddard's mostly from Reality Revolution, but there are some in his original voice I think I've put in there, and another channel giving voice to the Age of Wisdom. Well worth listening to. And with Neville Goddard, it was test it for yourself. And I thought, well, okay, got nothing to lose. I'm not being asked to subscribe to anything. I'm not being asked to invest money in something. It's just do it and see what happens. And it's one of those things I was doing anyway without even realizing I was doing it. Seeing my way on a journey, so you're sort of remembering the future, so you're visualizing and creating. Well, that was all right. That journey went with no hold-ups, no traffic jams. That was pleasant. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't held up because of a accident somewhere down the road, and now everything's ground to a halt. That type of thing. So this is basically how to do it, to find that within inside yourself. But it's like everything else, and it's expressed in this physical reality. Don't expect to run before you've learnt to walk. These things take time, because we're in a realm that has this thing called time, this measurement, this linear. So the outplay of things is subject to time, as it were. But the time in the positive sense, because there's the negative time of, oh, it's going to take years to do this. Well, it will if you have doubts about it, or if you're trying to be over ambitious. Start with small things, like I said before. Visualize finding a feather, something you can, or visualize, like I've done myself twice now. Visualize what would it be, and ask yourself the question, what would it be like to have all these problems with this phone resolved by having a replacement phone? And on both occasions, it's only taken 6 days from nothing to get to that. So I would say, if somebody asked me, how long does it take to get a replacement phone? I'd say 6 days, based on that experience. But of course, it may take longer, and of course, it is going to depend on how much feeling you put into it. If you've already got a mobile phone, then you know what it feels like in your hand. So you can draw upon that as well. So you've already got some experience you can use. And basically you're denying what the 5 senses are presenting to you in the external, which is you've got a faulty phone in that particular case. But now you're overwriting it. So if you see the natural green screen as being like a canvas, now you are the artist that is painting onto that canvas, our Father who art in heaven. Well, where's the heavens? It's the creation, it's the imagination. That is the creativity. And that permeates through everything, because there is an art in everything. Whether you want to apply a good or bad to it, you could say there is an art in lying. There is an art in a lot of things that I have no interest in, like sports. Someone who can run in a hurdle race and get that footing right to jump over every hurdle, but that's competing against each other. So watch for those subtle things. But I'm just using that as a pictorial reference to illustrate the point here. What are we up to here? Wow, nearly 30 minutes. So I think that's covered pretty much the etymology of the word individual, and how it is far more than it would first appear. And of course, the greater universe is you inverse. That is within inside yourself. This is something Lana A. Labonte has talked about. And another very good saying she comes out with, if you don't address it and suppress it, it will keep expressing itself to you. This is another thing where you can check in with yourself. Are you being triggered? Is there something that keeps happening to you? So you have to ask yourself, why does it keep happening? It's not the world is against you. It's actually guiding you. It's just whether you can read it in the right way and interpret it in the right way. In other words, see it for what it is. And it's like, now I get why that keeps happening, because there's a lesson in it for me. So it's something I need to address. It's about breaking patterns. This is something Jason on Archaics channel talks about as well. And the same with the habit side of smoking, for what the hands want to be holding something that I can smoke in my hand. But see, we've eliminated the tobacco and the enormous outlay, and of course, as every packet tells you in black and white, certainly within EU countries, tobacco has over 70 added extras that may cause cancer. Now, most people are going to read that and see tobacco and cancer and miss the entire bit in the middle. It's because it is commercially grown. Now, if you were to grow your own tobacco, yes, it'd have the nicotine thing, but it'd be far more healthy. I haven't got any tobacco seeds, but do I really want to take what in some ways will be a retrograde step? But it would also be an interesting experiment as well. I have grown tobacco before, and surprisingly, it doesn't like direct sunlight. I would have thought tobacco would want really warm, hot weather in full sunlight, but clearly not. It likes north-facing walls or somewhere that's shaded. Anyway, that's really digressed a little bit, and so I think we're in that there. Hopefully that has given you a lot to sort of ponder and a lot to sort of weigh up inside yourself. Remember, the secret is, to quote Neville again, the secret is in the feeling. How do you feel inside yourself? Always listen to your gut feeling. That is your solar plexus, which means place of the sun. And of course, the sun has to fall first. You have to go down to the root, just like it's reflected in nature. And then it starts growing up towards the light, which is the creativity of within the mind, the creator that is asleep in Golgotha, the mystery of Golgotha, as Rudolf Steiner talks about. The creator is dreaming and asleep until your Christ consciousness rises up the Jacob's ladder, which is your spine, and addresses you as my Lord. No one sees the Father except through the Son. Only the Son sees the Father. Notice the duality to that, but it's all an internal thing going on inside yourself. Whether you are taking active steps or even willing to wish to find this out for yourself is entirely up to you, but I can only give my personal experience on things. And have I got it all? No. I don't. You don't know whether you've got it all. I don't think you ever know if you've got it all, because each day is going to present you with a new challenge. How you react or respond to that is going to guide you as to how much more work you have to address inside yourself. And it's always a continuous refinement of self. If we're to think of, using a Rudolf Steiner terminology, the fourfold man, let's see what unfolds. Think of the Fourth Road Bridge. That is painted, and it takes a year to paint, and then so the story goes, and then they have to start again. Well, that's basically what we're doing inside ourselves. We're building a bridge within inside ourselves. So you're continuously renewing, you're continuously growing, and being the best possible version of yourself you can be all the time. That's, as far as I can see, is the whole purpose of this. God became man, so man can become God. There are lots in religion who will totally disagree with that, but that's because they have a limiting belief system, which of course is BS. Anyway, we'll leave that there. That's quite a bit to mull over, and love to you all.